Yes.
And you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can proceed.
Okay, great. I'm going to work on this issue with IT after I begin the meeting, if that's all right with you. And I'm just bringing up the newest script that was sent to me. So,
yes, I'll help.
Here, please.
I'll help as I can.
Thank you so much. It's been so helpful. I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Great. Good afternoon. I will call the reconvening meeting of the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services back to order. This meeting will be convened by electronic means as authorized under the order of the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General of the Province of British Columbia. Ministerial Order number M192. As such, council members are participating by phone, and as chair of this meeting, I am also participating by phone. Please note, if my connection is lost during any portion of this meeting, we will recess the meeting until my connection is restored. If council loses connection during the voting process, we will have staff on hand to facilitate getting you back online quickly while we suspend the voting process. The contact information has been circulated to you. Council is also reminded that we need to ensure there is quorum during the meeting, so please make sure your video is on. The live stream of this meeting will continue with audio only as council are participating in the meeting by phone. Presentations, amendments, and vote results will be projected to viewers when available. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of the City of Vancouver staff, who work hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair DeGenova. Mayor Stewart is on leave of absence for civic business. Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor DeGenova is in the chair. Councillor Fry.
Here.
Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Wiebe.
Present.
Councillor Boyle is on leave of absence for civic business today. Councillor Dominato.
Here, thanks.
Councillor Bly.
Present.
And Councillor Kirby-Young.
Present.
The meeting has quorum, Chair DeGenova.
Thanks so much. I just want to go over the plan for the day. And Council, we don't have very long before we have another meeting that will start as well. So speakers should follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of the meeting so they don't miss their turn to speak. Any comments on agenda items can be sent to Council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out at Van City Clerk. We have 2 remaining items of business on today's agenda. 2 member motions referred from the council meeting on September 15th to the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services meeting on September 16th, and subsequently the 29th to hear from speakers. And subsequently, due to time constraints, these motions have been referred to today. Following the last speaker on each speaker's list, I will go over the list again to check for those who were not present earlier. A reminder that when presentations or amendments are being streamed, the public feed has a slight delay, Council. Now to start with the referred council member motions. We have two, as I've mentioned, that remain from previous meetings. Our first item is mental health and addiction reform and expert-led cross-jurisdictional task force, which was moved by Councillor Dominato and seconded by myself, Councillor DiGenova. We will now hear speakers on this motion. Our first speaker is, and I believe the first speaker is Karen Ward, but I'd just like to check with the clerk.
That is correct. This is the clerk here. Karen Ward was originally going to be in person, but I understand is on the phone.
Okay, thanks so much. And if we could have the operator put Karen through now, that would be great.
Good afternoon, am I on?
Yes, Karen, you are. And I'm going to ask the clerk to start your timer now. I'm having some technical errors, but you've done this before. You have up to 5 minutes to speak, and there may be questions from council for you after.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, council. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to just quickly address this motion on a task force for mental health and addiction. It's, as we all know, as we've only become more aware recently, it's essential that we address the issues at hand. But I beg you not to delay with more discussion. I've been saying the neighborhood, really, we know exactly what to do. We know that every government level is involved. If we delay, more people will die. If we talk, we die. And it could not be more urgent that you act now. I think all the end notes and the references in this motion are all absolutely true. I participated in many of those tables myself, and we know exactly what to do. Please don't delay. Please let's not talk. Please take action now. That's really all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And because I do have some IT difficulties, I'll ask the clerk, are there any questions for Karen Ward?
This is the clerk here. Yes, we have Councillor Swanson on the queue.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Swanson, up to 3 minutes. I'll ask the clerk to time you.
Yeah, Karen, this motion is about services and a task force on services. Would you say that services are what we need, or would you say it's more like housing, safe supply, higher welfare rates, stuff like that?
Housing and safe supply are in fact services, actually, and I don't think it's worth it to prioritize. I think it's necessary to have all of these things. Otherwise, otherwise the possibility of reaching people does tend to fall apart. If you've got housing and no doctor, it doesn't really. It's not going to work. If you have a doctor and no housing, it's not going to work. If you have an income and no home, it's not going to work. If you have a home and it's not going to work, right? So it's not a competition. I think that it's about providing, finding a way to actually fulfill the promises that have been made by society to provide people with choices for their own lives, not to put them in boxes. I don't think that prioritizing solutions before we have them is a good idea, and I don't think it's super helpful. I think that we all know that all those things are necessary, and you can't. And the fact that it's all divided up between different levels of government is exactly what governments have intended to do for the last 30 years, is to make it impossible for any one level to solve. So I do think we know the answers. I do think we know the solutions. I think it will take effort and focus and bravery.
Okay, thank you, dear.
Thank you, Jane.
Thanks very much, Councillor Swanson. Are there any other council questions, Madam Clerk?
Yes, the next councillor is Councillor Weeb.
Okay. Councillor Weeb, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. You just talked about the importance of having the different levels of government working together. I'm just wondering where you think, as an order of government, the Indigenous First Nations should be involved in this discussion.
They should be. They could actually do this in a good way. I think that at the absolute earliest possible point. We know that 38%, over 38% of people in Vancouver who are homeless are Indigenous. I mean, there's the, this is today's Orange Shirt Day. We're talking about the legacy of residential schools and intergenerational trauma, and that's what we see. So I think that it would be wise and also good. It would be the right thing to do to bring the Indigenous nations,
First Nations involved,
discussion, and to listen to what what they want, what they need for healing for their own people. I mean, a lot of people for example, I can only really speak to my experience in the neighborhood. If people in the neighborhood say they want to, there's the things you can stay here, and here's your place here, and here's your housing. Well, some people who have been down here for 30 years want to go home, so it's really important to listen. There's not one solution for anything. I mean, I've been saying, in the drug policy stuff, there are no silver bullets. Everyone's looking for a magic solution. There's not one out there. There is no silver bullet because this is not a werewolf, right? This is a complicated disaster. But we know the solutions. Their solutions are really simple. You put them all together, and you've got, it's housing, it's choices, it's income, it's choices. There are people who are really, really messed up because nothing but bad has happened to them. We don't need to make it more complicated. It's just delay is killing so many people. Nothing is going to be. They're not looking for perfection or magic. It's just going to take work. I'm sorry, it's just work, and it's required to say, look, this is a priority. That's what you see the priorities in your budget, and that's all there is to it. You can't talk your way out of that one. No task.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor DiGenova. The next councillor is Councillor Kirby-Young.
Oh, good. Okay.
Thanks very much. And I'll ask you to put through Councillor Kirby-Young. And what I'm going to try to take over for a moment just while I restart my computer here in working with IT. Is that all right, Vice Chair Fry?
Yep, that's quite all right. I'm on it.
Great.
Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hi, how are you?
Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Okay.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sorry, is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, great. How are you doing?
Elle, it's great.
I wanted to ask you about how important, I think you touched on it a little bit, but I want to understand a bit more how important you think coordination is amongst the different levels of government. And I guess related to that, do we really need to shift up because what we're doing right now is just not working or not making things better?
Delay is really detrimental, first of all, and I think that coordination would be great, but I don't see how this complicated system of government where we've got all these different moving parts. You can't wait for the perfect moment. I don't think that's. I certainly wouldn't advise that because who knows when that's going to happen. And realistically, this has been something that's been unfolding for for over 20 years. And it is messy. I have no doubt. It's very messy. It's very bad. It's only going to get worse unless we could start, making the moves that we can in the moment that you can make them. And that is, if the province has housing, you do it. If something, you've got to take all the efforts that you can, and you're not looking for one solution. I think that's what the main point that I would emphasize. There is no one solution. This is a lot of different people from a lot of, it isn't a one size kind of mess, and it's different in different places. I was talking to somebody who was out in in Surrey, and they have an entirely different situation. So that if you have grant money coming from another level of government, the solution is going to look completely different when it gets to the ground. And I think that's important to recognize. I think that might be one of the structural problems behind some of what I hear around temporary modular housing. It is the same idea put in different places, and maybe sometimes, and sometimes you need to make things very specific to the situation. That's understandable, and that's not a failure. That's an adaptation. And one of the things that I've learned too is like single person housing is probably not the best for people who are using drugs, because if they must be alone by definition in their housing, that puts them at a higher risk of overdose and death. So let's not do that. Let's not make them do that. That's why people refuse to go into housing, because they don't want to die, right? So let's acknowledge that there's a real thing happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I'm sorry that's time, but I really appreciate the perspective. Thank you.
Yeah. Anytime.
Thanks, Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Dominato for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Karen, for making the time to call in. I wanted to just ask you, I appreciate your point about there's not one single solution, and I've always been an advocate for a spectrum of supports, from harm reduction to treatment. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing that with the rollout of, and I know we don't have a fully implemented safer supply in our province, but I've heard that with the rollout, we're really not reaching a lot of individuals who are living on our streets or precariously housed. Right. And I'm wondering if that's something you're hearing. And also I'm hearing that once people are getting into detox, that they're not able to access treatment beds after that. And so I'm just wondering if those are things that you're hearing as well.
I think the first thing the new safer supply, the order that was signed on September 16th, they had to come up. They had to change the nurses, the Health Professions Act, and they had for some reason they had to come up with protocols for prescribing. This was all unknown, and they're actually still doing it. And then they called an election, so none of this is going to be happening until the minimum. We lost a month because of the election. That means like 150 people will die, in the province. And we're struggling so much right now to just keep people alive. It's horrible. Mm-hmm. So no, we're nowhere further along than we were this time last month, because the nurses aren't actually empowered yet to go out on the streets. They're very eager to do that, to be street nurses, able to prescribe, meet people where they are actually at, right? Because that's what was missing in the first iteration of Safe Supply, and this is going to be an ongoing expansion, I think. And I think that's the way to do it. But nurses get this, that to meet people where they're at, they have to go and meet them. This is a really obvious point. So I have a great hope for that, starting at the end of October. But this has been a hell of a month, and this is going to be a very bad month. And I'm astonished that that wasn't top of mind, and I hope that it's heartbreaking. But I think that I would like to say that it would be really good if cities, if we could, and if cities in general could support the operations and the outreach and the work of street nurses in a really concentrated way for a couple months after when that program begins, when they are empowered to actually prescribe on the spot. Mm-hmm. Let's do all we can to make that as to support them, because they've been through hell too with COVID. Let's support them as much as we can, and let's also let's make it as easy and as as straightforward and as out. And this is the thing, right? Because what we're doing here is we're just saying, stand up. You want this? You can do it. You can do it. You can save your own life. Here we go. So let's be strong and clear about that, and let's support everyone involved. Because that would make a world of difference, so I'm hopeful for that. We've got a little time. Let's anticipate it and do it well, and let's keep everybody as alive as we can right now. And then when we get when people are, what I've seen with Safe Supply thus far is that when people start on a program, it does, because you're getting. See, the thing is, you're getting what you're actually wanting. as opposed to a pile of, poison and various crap. And so your head clears. People, people aren't, taking God knows what. They're actually very, like, a lot of lucidity comes back, and it's really, really amazing to see. And then people have they are able to make some choices about their lives. And I think that's the first step. Like, you don't even need to push on something like detoxes. You really can't do a detox when people are using fentanyl and all this stuff. It's just too much. And then if they go back outside, if they go back on the street, they basically you overdose and die if you go anywhere near it. It's horrible. But it's more of a transition, again, like you said, a spectrum of moving along and making choices. Like there's a whole spectrum, right? From safe supply all the way through to methadone or Suboxone. That's a whole range of possibilities in there. From IO
Speaker, I'm sorry, I'm gonna
all that sort of thing. Yeah. Certainly, that's just coming up.
I'm going to have to.
Karen, you and I have run out of time.
I gave you an extra minute and a half there.
Fair enough.
But thank you so much.
Thank
you. If I can indulge my own question of you, Speaker, and have the clerk advance me on the queue. I'm curious, as you know, former Minister Judy Darcy will not be running again, and of course, she was instrumental in this first iteration of the Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction. As we'll see a new elected, hopefully, role taking that position, do you think that this motion is a good framework for them to maybe pursue this work? And is there anything that you might additionally want to see incorporated to support the work of that ministry and enhance it with a mandate as may be appropriate?
We were talking about that the other day. I don't know if I think that I was not. I think a lot of the work was problematic in various ways. I think my primary concern with the ministry was that it wasn't actually invested with legislative power. That's all remains in the portfolio of the Minister of Health provincially. So I think that, and furthermore, there's this whole discourse around stakeholders, which to me sounds a little creepy. And I don't know. I really think that this whole system, like, we have to acknowledge that there's been a massive system failure. We really do. And instead of everyone kind of beating their chest and saying how great they are at caring for people, like, we really need to acknowledge that things have gone very badly, that we've had a very serious disaster in the last 4 years. A lot of people have died. There's nothing to be really that proud of, and that's on every level. And it's not about blame, but it's about recognizing that we need to do things differently. So I hope that if this, we don't even know, right? Like, this ministry is created, we don't know if it will continue in the same form. If it does, I hope the minister is someone who's given the authority and the encouragement in the ministerial letter to take that look at it, to take a really critical look at how the province in general has over these years, failed and tried and we have as already said, we have a system, but it's actually held together with Band-Aids and duct tape. It's not a system anymore. It's a shadow of one. So I really hope that there's a real serious critical look at how things have been done and how they must change. And that applies to a lot of things, but that in particular.
Thanks, Speaker. Appreciate your time. You have no other questions. Now I see Chair DeGenova's back on the line, possibly.
Cookies or croissants or something.
I am here.
I'm starving.
And Councillor Hardwick, perhaps mute although cookies and croissants sound great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Back over to you, Chair DeGenova.
Thank you very much. And our fabulous IT staff have managed to. We all share this one computer, Councillor Carr, myself, and Mayor Stewart when we're chairing. So, it has really good security on it, and we need our staff sometimes to help get us in. So, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Fry. So we are through the speakers. Both of the speakers on the list have been called?
I believe there's a second speaker yet to.
There is, and can I just ask? I'll ask the clerk to announce the second speaker if the second speaker is here via phone.
It is the clerk here, Chair DeGenova, and I'm hearing that the second speaker has not joined in yet, but the name is Devin Cooper.
Okay, Devin Cooper. Sorry. There we go. I have my speakers list here. So Devin Cooper is not here. And that is the only other speaker that we have to this. Is that correct?
That I confirm that is correct, yes.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, do we have, I'll take us to main queue here. And Councillor Dominato, you had moved the motion, so customarily, usually the mover of the motion speaks to it. But I see Councillor Swanson on there. If you'd like to speak later, you can do so. Councillor Swanson, let me reset your timer here. I don't know why it said 48 seconds. Go ahead.
I'm fine with Councillor Dominato going first. Or anybody else.
I think, Madam Chair, I think I already introduced the motion previously, so I'm happy to let Councillor Swanson go or Councillor Weeb, because I think he might be on the queue.
Right now, I only have one queue. Oh, there we go. Okay, now I see that. Councillor Swanson, I'm going to reset your timer. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just sent an amendment basically to say that housing, income, and safe supply would be considered services for the purpose of this task force. So it doesn't go off just talking about health services, and also putting in that part that Karen Ward said about giving people choices.
Great. Is that all, Councillor Swanson?
Yep, that's it.
Thanks. Councillor Weeb. Councillor Weeb.
I'm supportive of this amendment. I guess we're still in an amendment queue now.
My apologies, we're on the main queue, but it should have been an amendment queue. You're correct.
So I'll be supportive. I think that this is, I thought what this included services is a good one, and it talks about considering, and I think we do need to consider these elements.
And Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if through you I could ask a question of the mover.
I'd rather it not go to back and forth debate, just as I've told others. But yes, please go ahead. You can ask a point of information. It's their choice if they answer it.
Okay, thank you. My point of information, Councillor Swanson, is just whether or not you considered referencing treatment as an important service, because I don't see that reference or included in your amendment.
Well, I'm just listening to what Karen said, that sometimes when people go into treatment and then they come out, and then it's a really dangerous time because their tolerance is down, and they a lot of times can overdose on a smaller amount and die. So I was also thinking that treatment was included in the other types of services that were referenced in the rest of the motion. So okay. I didn't think I needed to add it. I thought the things that were missing were the things that I added.
Okay. Even though housing, I see, is referenced, the intersectionality with housing is referenced in the motion.
Yeah.
As well as harm reduction, which includes safe supply and a number of measures. In your mind, is that, would you say that was fair?
I just think it's really important that these three things be emphasized, so that we are not really focused on the health parts of it and on the idea that we have to have one person helping somebody else. That I think it's really important for us to understand that we have to have some basic things in place for all human beings. And these right now are the basic things that we need, I think, to deal with the issues that we have. The other kinds of services are necessary and really important too, but I think you can't have them unless you have them on top of these. I mean, you can't have them work unless you have them on top of these.
Okay, thanks very much.
Councillor Kirby-Young, anything further?
No, not right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Fry, to the amendment.
Sorry. I'm going to just quickly write up an amendment to the amendment. I appreciate the intent of this, but I think shifting the actual goal to providing choices for people's lives distracts from I think, what some of the overarching goals are of this original motion, which I also support. So I'm just quickly sending in an amendment to the amendment, which basically just, rather than suggesting that the goal is to provide people with choices, it's important services, and providing people with the choices for their own lives. So it's that they're all 4 goals, rather than isolating that as the paramount goal. I hope that's agreeable to folks. I don't think it really changes the intent, just doesn't distract from the fulsome approach. That's all.
Move us to an amendment. Or have you sent it in, Councillor Fry?
Yeah, in fact, it's on the screen. Although, actually,
all right, so I'm
if
moving
you might
to
indulge me.
amendment Q2. All right, go ahead.
And further, if you might indulge me, I just see there's an extra "and" in there, so perhaps.
Yeah, I can make that administrative.
Yeah, so instead of "and safe supply," so it would be adequate income, safe supply as important services.
Okay, I'm just going to advance you, and you can speak to it, Councillor Fry. Go ahead. There you go.
That was it. I just spoke. Thank you.
Okay. All right. There we go. What I'm going to do is, I don't see anyone to speak to that, so we will call an amendment to the amendment. Please vote on screen, Council.
Chair, can I get a vote of Councillor Bly in favor? Thank you.
Yes. And I just have to ask the clerk, is everyone have their voting panel up? Because I've called a vote.
No, I don't.
I do not have one, Madam.
No, I don't either.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, I've called a vote, and the voting screen is where it should be. Maybe there was just a delay. Now, Council, you can vote. Please do. Okay. And if we could get a vote assist for Councillor Bly. Councillor Bly, can you register your vote again for the clerk?
Favor.
In favor? Okay. And that passes with unanimous support. That brings us back to the amendment. Councillor Fry.
All good. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. And that then brings us to the amended amendment. Please vote on screen, Council. I'm just going to reset the vote here. There we go. Please vote on screen. Okay, and I'm just trying to vote here myself. It's just registering. Okay. And that passes with unanimous support. Okay, and what I'm going to do, Council, is we were in, I'm clearing the queue here. If there's anyone who would like to speak to the amended motion. Councillor Wiebe? Oh, not sure what happened there. Councillor Wiebe, go ahead.
Yeah, I've submitted an amendment, and it's a small amendment. One recognizing.
Madam Chair, my apologies for the interruption.
Yes.
We did not see a vote registered for Councillor Bly. She may have needed vote assist.
Thank you, Clerk. It's in favor. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. And Councillor Bly, if you could just call a point of privilege to ask for a vote assist at each vote, that's helpful, just to make sure. That's usually the practice. But thank you very much, and I'll try and keep that in mind. So if you could mark Councillor Bly as in favor, please. Thank you, Madam Clerk. In the vote record. Okay, and sorry, Councillor Wiebe, go ahead. You would submit an amendment. I'll move us to an amendment queue. There we go. Just going to pop you back on the queue right there. Okay. Just to the clerk, I've got the queue here, so I'm not sure if we're both pushing buttons, but there we go. Councillor Wiebe, go ahead.
Yeah, I've made two little amendments. The first one is to change Premier Horgan to the Premier-elect, recognizing that the population of the province is currently in an election. I don't want to suppose on who would be the Premier moving forward. And the second change is to add Indigenous to the orders of government.
Councillor Bly, do you need a vote assist?
Sorry, I didn't hear you call the vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I cut out there for a moment.
Madam Chair, I didn't hear either. I was going to.
Okay, maybe I should ask the clerk then for, Madam Clerk, I just had a bit of a delay. I didn't see mute on here for myself, but I called the vote. Since no one has voted, can we move back and hear from speakers or no?
Chair DiGenova, this is the clerk here. That is really your call. No one heard you call the vote, so I think if that is your will and council's will.
All right. And I'll just stay in close contact with you in case I need some more technical assistance. But Councillor Dominato, to the amendment to the main motion.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just briefly to say thank you for the amendments and also a consideration for, and I appreciated Councillor Wiebe's question earlier around Indigenous governments and the inclusion of Indigenous governments in a provincially, federally led task force. And so I think that's a really thoughtful amendment. So thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, is it all right if I call a vote?
Yes, of course, Madam Chair.
Okay. I mostly did that to see if you could hear me, but please vote on screen. Thank you. Council?
Privilege? May I have a vote assist, please? In favor.
Okay, Councillor Bly, could we please mark Councillor Bly as in favor? And I don't have a voting panel, even myself. Yes.
I don't either, Councillor.
I'm going to ask, is there a reason, Madam Clerk, why we may not all have voting panels? It might just take a moment, Council. I've noticed there's a bit of a delay, and I think it may be coming.
It is it's the clerk here, Chair DiGenova. Yes, the machine seems to be hesitating or has a lag. We will go into the voting now and make sure it is called.
Okay, so if not, Council, we may just have to register our votes. We may have to register our votes manually, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset. Yes, it's been reset. Please vote on screen. Now I'm seeing a panel. And Councillor Bly, we will register your vote in favor as you'd asked. Okay, and Councillor Kirby-Young has not voted. And can I get a vote assist for Councillor Bly, please? In favor. Okay, and that passes with unanimous support. All right, and that brings us back to the main queue. Councillor Councillor Wiebe. Anything more to say?
No, I'm supportive of this being brought forward. I think this is really important, and looking forward to vote for it.
Okay. Councillor Carr, to the motion.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I appreciate very much the additions made by fellow councillors to this. I listened very carefully to our speaker, Karen Ward, who has come to us so many times speaking so passionately and eloquently on this issue, and very much appreciate the fact that she does keep coming and informing us of her lived experience. But the point she was making about how we need to get on with it was also coupled with the point of, to use her words, things are divided up, and it's why we haven't solved the issue. So I very much support this motion because I think it gets at the heart of that. And there are two words that really, for me, are critical in this motion. One is cross-jurisdictional, and the other is emergency. So this is a cross-jurisdictional emergency task force. And I can't help but think back to when Vancouver was leading the country, because there was a cross-jurisdictional emergency task force of the multi-levels of government under former Mayor Philip Owen, and that out of that came the 4 Pillars strategy and the first supervised injection site. I do think it takes that kind of collaborative cross-jurisdictional work to get action happening, and the use of the word emergency to me is incredibly important because it is an emergency. We are losing more people to overdose deaths from the opioid crisis than we have even to COVID-19. So I'm supporting this motion because I think it gets at the heart of the stumbling block in action. And thank you very much, Councillor Dominato, for bringing it forward.
Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, I'm going to vote for this. When I first saw it, and it does focus on mental health and addiction, and I'm thinking, oh my God, the situation that we're facing now started in 1492 when Indigenous land was stolen. It started back in the early 1900s with drug prohibition. It started in 1993 when the feds stopped funding most social housing. It started in 1996 when the feds stopped funding half of welfare. So right now, with all of those things, the drug war, colonization, extreme poverty because welfare rates are so low and not enough housing that people can afford. I think if we dealt with those really systemic issues in a real way, that the number of people who have mental health and addiction issues would be a lot less. I remember one time going to a little workshop of young people with mental health issues, and they said their biggest thing that they wanted in the world was to be able to go out and have a coffee with their friends, but they couldn't afford it. And I'm a little bit afraid, that we could have a whole system of providing excellent services for people, but a lot of my friends who do provide these services say, but I can't find my client because they don't have a home and I have to go searching all over the neighborhood for them. So, yes, we need coordination, but I think we could coordinate till hell freezes over. And if we don't have housing, if we don't have adequate income, we're still not going to be able to, and if we don't have a safe supply, we're still not going to be able to solve the problem. I was pleased to see that Councillor Dominato put people with lived experience in this motion, and I would hope that when people with lived experience are involved, if it happens, they will make up a sizable portion of this task force. That they won't be the token person with lived experience or the token 2 people with lived experience, because we need people in there who can support and reinforce each other, and they're the ones that really know what needs to happen. I think our council knows that housing and that welfare rates and colonization are big problems. We've passed all kinds of resolutions on this, but I think where the rubber is going to hit the road is when we start trying to make some decisions about this report that we're going to get about homelessness on October 2nd. And with that report, I think we're going to have to make some decisions about, are we willing to actually fund the solutions? And I think if we're not willing to fund them, we're just going to delay the solutions. More people are going to die. And so I'm hoping that we get a good report that looks at how to house all people that don't have housing, and proposes some ways that we can actually fund it, even if we have to use our own money. We can send a bill to the feds after. That's it.
Okay, Councillor Swanson. Thanks. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief because I don't want to repeat what others have said, and because time matters, and I think timeliness is really important. I just want to thank Councillor Dominato for bringing this forward. I think that we're very aligned philosophically on the critical importance of this. I do fundamentally believe that bringing the parties together is important. I think COVID has just exacerbated and laid bare these sort of deep, ongoing and sustained issues that we have in the city of Vancouver that have been getting, quite frankly, worse and not better. And I think that, as was referenced with the 4 pillars approach, I always, refer to it as sort of the unbalanced stool. It's like it was missing a leg. And to me, the mental health and addictions piece of it is really critical. Not saying that the other components are not, but it is the piece that I think has been the most void of access and availability and connectivity and service and coordination. And so that's what I hear a lot from people, from families who have lost people that have expressed personally that they felt that if their loved one had been able to go into treatment when they were willing, that they might have been here today, but it wasn't available to them. And that to me is incredibly significant. So I'd like to see, the 4-legged stool balanced. And I'd like to see this void fulfilled. And I do really think that there's a big opportunity and a lesson here from COVID around the power of declaring an emergency and bringing full focus and attention and efforts to bear towards trying to make a difference. And I think that we have to be open to doing some things differently and rebalancing that stool appropriately between the different supports and components to actually not just try to keep people alive and to sustain lives, but to improve lives and help move people along the continuum to a better place. So that's my hope for this motion. I really am very grateful to Councillor Dominato for bringing it forward, and I'm wholeheartedly happy to support it. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you to my council colleagues for their thoughtful comments, and also for Karen for her comments and calling in. And I appreciated at the outset she talked about how what's necessary and needed. We know what the solutions are, but she talked about what's needed is the effort, the focus, and bravery. And when I was asked about this motion yesterday, I had, by a member of the media, I had talked about how we need urgency, intention, coordination, and ultimately political will at all levels of government. And I think that touches on what Councillor Carr was getting at in terms of the cross-jurisdiction, because the different levels of government have different responsibilities. The province in terms of service delivery, and the federal government around drug policy. But at the local level, we see these things play out in our communities or neighborhoods. These are our friends, our neighbors, and there is an emergency. And I was reflecting on while addictions has been, I think, a huge focus of the conversation in our city, because we've had a public health emergency since 2016, and 5,000 people have lost their lives. And even just in the last 7 to 8 months, we know that I think it's over 900 people now have lost their lives to overdoses. And by comparison, COVID, it's a little over 200 people. And so we know there's a critical emergency here. But I included mental health in this too because it's unseen and people are struggling, and we've actually heard that in the context of COVID, of the social isolation and the impact it's had on people's mental well-being. But I think back to my very good friend of mine who struggled with bipolar and tried to kill herself several times, and thankfully she's with us today and she's contributing in a really positive manner to our society and giving back and making the world a better place by talking about her experience. But I also think about my stepdaughter's sister who went for dinner with her father, and then the next day he was found dead in his apartment, and he had overdosed. These are real people, and I think that what I'm really trying to draw attention to is that we do need to step things up. Karen talked about a shadow of a system, and it's a bit of a band-aided system. The whole intent of this task force and to get the different levels of government together is to get them rowing in the same direction and to address those gaps and make some systemic change that we're going to see. And so I want to thank Council for the thoughtful comments and the amendments on this, but I do think it's critical that we advocate and work together on these issues.
Thanks, Councillor Dominato. Seeing no one else on the queue, I will call a vote on this, Council. And I just had to reconnect, but my connection's better, so let me know if you can't vote. Okay, and that, and Councillor Kirby-Young and Councillor Fry, if you could please vote. And Councillor Bly, you voted, you've registered your vote, correct? I believe so.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure that wasn't in error. Okay, and that passes with unanimous support. Okay. All right. Council. Yeah.
Madam Chair, it's the clerk here. Yes. Sorry, yes. We also had an unregistered vote on that last one. Councillor Fry has not voted yet. Does he need an assist?
Councillor Fry.
I thought I voted.
I did see Councillor Fry vote in favor. I waited until all the votes were registered. I asked him to vote. He did vote. I think there's a bit of a delay, but I saw it. You did vote, correct, Councillor Fry?
I voted in favor. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, but good to check. Thanks. We'll just keep in contact on this, as I know it's been a bit of an issue this morning. And just a moment, Council, I know that we only have until 2:30 for this meeting right now. That being said, we are through the first item, and the last item is short-term actions to preserve and expand access to mental health resources in housing in Grandview Woodlands, which was moved by myself, Councillor DiGenova, and seconded by Councillor Dominato. We will now hear speakers on this motion, but before we do so, my apologies. I was supposed to hand the chair over to you before I'd said that, Councillor Fry. I thought it was after I'd said that. So I was just about to do that, but I'd like to hand the chair over to you because this is my motion.
Okay. Let me just pull up my script. Thank you, Chair. Okay, this last item is short-term actions to preserve and expand access to mental health resources and housing in Grandview Woodlands, which was moved by Councillor DiGenova and seconded by Councillor Dominato. We will now hear from speakers on this motion, and our first speaker, and I'm afraid I don't have a speakers list. Clerk, could you help me out with the first speaker, please?
Certainly, this is the clerk here. And the first speaker that is to join by phone is Devin Cooper. I understand, however, that Devin Cooper is not on the line.
Okay.
Would you like me to move to the next speaker?
Please. Thank you.
The next speaker is an in-person speaker, and Stephen Bojas. And Stephen Bojas is just entering the chamber.
Okay, thank you, Clerk. As we wait, of course, we remind that for every speaker, we ask them to state their full name, and if it's not already stated, if they're a resident of Vancouver. And is Mr. Bojas getting set up to speak?
We live in Granby Woodland in Vancouver. I actually live about 5 minutes away, or 5 blocks away from the site, 5 minutes on foot. Go to the bakery. I cycle by there all the time. So I know the site very well. And what I wanted to present council with is this idea that temporary modular housing is actually an option for ADNAC and commercial because there's an urgent need for housing. And I think we could have immediate action from the province and the city by going with this solution. Pictured here is temporary modular housing at Main and Terminal. This is actually the first one that was built in an L shape, and it has 40 units. Yesterday, we heard at Strathcona Park for the protests that people were saying, we want action, we want safe homes for all. At the largest encampment in the city, at the missing middle motion, there was an urgent call for action. And in Granby Woodland, I see homelessness everywhere. It's evident on the drive and parks and so on. Next slide, please. So if we look at the site on the left is actually the site of the temporary modular housing, and the top green, the orchard's still there. It's the old aerial photo. And on the right is the site at the parking lot. And the parking lot actually is 21% bigger than terminal. So this parking lot is on the other side. So there's the block between the commercial diversion, commercial, Venables, and ADNAC. So this is on the north side of that large block on the north side of the laneway. And this actually fits because it is 21% bigger. Next slide, please. And there's a comparison. This is a newer air photo. You can see the building with 40 units of temporary modular housing on the left, and the site there. So I've done the comparison. We've got a good fit there. It's an easy site to do the change. Next slide. And here I've actually taken the air photo, cut out the temporary modular housing, and put it on the site so it fits. You don't have to do any design changes, and you can have 40 units of temporary modular housing with a small office. And there's actually a little bit more space. You could put extra bays and do even more housing with this layout to provide even more opportunities for people. Next slide. That's the parking lot. It's very, very underused. Hardly anyone's ever there. Next slide. And yeah, you can see it again. There's a uprising bakery on one side, and there's even an option to put a piazza on that side that we were discussing during the community planning process. There's a small little parkette on the other side of ADNAC. This is a traffic calmed area on ADNAC because of the bike lane. So it's a good fit with the neighborhood. Next slide, please. That's 220 Terminal. That could be moved. Next slide. It's a very, very simple site, much simpler than Copley and in Cedar Cottage in terms of very minimum grade. So the design's done. Next slide. And again, we've got our parking lot comparison. I'm just going to go forward one slide, and we're going to go back one. So that's go back. So that building fits. So with saying this, community plan actually looks at 30 units of social housing for the Kettle. Now this is asked for 50 units. I'll just mention that the Kettle has hundreds of units that they manage throughout the city, including a large tower on Burrard Street and 1720 Kingsway. So there are a lot of units out there, and this would be an opportunity to do immediate social housing on the site to serve Granby Woodland and the area. I've also visited every single temporary modular housing complex in the city in terms of looking at all the sites. I'm quite familiar with them. And I think there's so much that could be done here. The No Tower Coalition actually signed a petition with 4,400 names against the idea of a tower, but the message was no tower, or no to a tower, but yes to social housing. And a lot of that information is on the novenabletower.wordpress.com site. And there were hundreds of signs throughout the community and the petition. We all know about that. But I'm looking at going forward and finding a solution that could work immediately. And I would just like to present this idea to council, like, could we move on temporary modular housing on this site immediately? Could council consider asking Premier Horgan now, would they be interested in kickstarting the funding for this to get this done very rapidly and implemented within months? Because you have the design, it fits, and talking to my neighbors in the community and the Grandview Woodland Area Council, there's a very large amount of support for temporary modular housing on this site. So thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Bohus. Let me just pull and see if we have any questions for you. Yes, we do. Councillor Dominato for 3 minutes.
Oh, Chair, I think that's a holdover from the last.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I also see Councillor DiGenova on this list. Councillor DiGenova, did you have questions for the speaker?
Thanks so much. Yes, I do. I understand that this is actually in the new Grandview Woodland Plan, and it was also endorsed by, and as I noted in the motion, the Citizens Assembly, and that had seen the kettle as a great benefit in the community. There's nothing in this motion that prescribes how high the kettle would build or what exactly it would build. So I wonder, Mr. Bowman, I know we've been starting to actually use, maybe I could call you Stephen. I know we're trying not to genderize names here in council, so my apologies. But I'm just wondering, this is in a plan. Often you come to us and talk about how area plans are important and we should be considering that and maybe not zoning outside of the plan. So what I'm asking for in this motion is to work within the plan, for staff to work within the plan. I'm not prescribing exactly what would be built, but that the kettle would be able to maintain the drop-in center as well as the BC housing funding that has been earmarked to them. So I'm just wondering if you support that, because it is in the Grandview Woodlands plan, along with the Citizens Assembly. It's in their report to council, and they endorse the kettle in that.
Well, I think you're right in the large structure, but if we start really digging into details, and I remember when you welcomed a whole wide section of Grandview Woodland residents to speak about our concerns about the tower on the site, and we were pretty clear. We were concerned about the height, but we were supporting the social housing. And if you look at even the difference between what was in the draft community plan that was presented to council and the last-minute amendments done by Andrea Reinberg, it's different. Things were changed after.
Can I ask you? I have very limited time. I only have 3 minutes.
So I just wanted to say that if we dig into the details, there's differences.
No. Excuse me. My question time now. I gave you your time. Just wondered if this isn't a tower, because nowhere in here have I said a tower or prescribed the stories. However, the kettle hasn't said that modular would work for them and their drop-in center or any other way. And I know that we could risk losing them in the community. Would you support the kettle staying in the community? Do you support us working with them to make sure they can stay in the community and serve people?
I think this is a broader discussion with the entire community. I think there's general support for that, but it really comes down to the details, and there has to be a lot of outreach, and maybe the kettle could work with members of the No Tower Coalition and other residents groups there, GWAC, to find something that works well for everyone. And I'm with this presentation, I'm just saying that temporary modular housing could be used both for offices and for housing, and you could have immediately 40 to 50 housing units on that site with the office space, depending on how it's configured.
Well, we're not BC Housing, and we don't make all of those decisions. But thank you very much for attempting to answer.
Yeah, and thanks for your questions.
And that's all from me.
Chair Fry, are you on the line?
Oh, my apologies. Sorry, I was on mute this whole time. Here I was talking and everything. Thanks, Mr. Bohus, for coming to speak to council. Clerk, do we have Devin Cooper on the line to speak?
I understand. It's the clerk here. I understand that Devin Cooper is still not on the line. Just a second, I'm getting a message. No, I'm sorry. He is not on the line.
Okay, well, then that would be it for our speakers who have signed up for this item. Now, Councillor, is there any discussion? I see a list forming quickly there. Councillor DeGenova is first on the list.
Thanks very much, Councillor Fry. I had actually sent in an amendment.
Okay. Perhaps we'll move over to an amendment queue. And we'll get that pulled up on the screen. Clerk, do you have Councillor DeGenova's amendment? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Councillor DeGenova, to your amendment. Oh, I'm sorry, Clerk, if we could clear the queue and move Councillor DeGenova to the amendment queue, please.
It's the clerk here, Chair Fry, and yes, the amendment is on the screen.
Okay, we just lost it, but and I think we have Councillor Dominato at 217 on the amendment queue. If we can clear the amendment queue and for Councillor DeGenova, please. Councillor DeGenova, to your amendment.
Thanks so much. First of all, Council, thanks for indulging me in this. I have moved forward with an amendment in careful consideration and really trying to respect the fact that it's about leaving no stone unturned. So, perhaps the words that I was looking for aren't to allocate, because I maybe shouldn't ask staff to allocate. Technically, we allocate. But if we were to direct staff to identify funding available through the City of Vancouver, including looking at CHIP grants. And the reason I mention that is this is a very new program. When, unfortunately, the Kettle's previous project wasn't able to move forward, although it was part of the Grandview Woodlands plan, I understand that there was a gap and I believe that they've met with a number of councillors, but there's a gap of a few $1 million there. And recently, CHIP grants have offered, that leg up for a couple of different organizations. We just actually allocated a CHIP grant of over $6 million to one organization that staff had identified those funds for. And I'm not suggesting that maybe CHIP grants are the way, but I'm just asking that staff identify this, and they include, that they look at funding available, and that funding that it's available could include CHIP grants. So in the interest of understanding that this meeting, we only have 15 minutes left, I'll leave it at that. But really, what concerns me, and I'll just speak to most of it right here, so I don't have to go through rounds and rounds and rounds, is that the Kettle might not be able to stay in Vancouver. That's my understanding. To be able to serve the amount of people that they need to and make their pro formas work, they need that drop-in center and the funding that's been earmarked for their specific needs from BC Housing, that I also understand through the letters, Council, that we've all received, and one that I put in the appendix to this motion, also is not earmarked for a piece of land or an address or community. It is for the Kettle project. And as we sit here recently, and it's ironic, we just finished a motion committing to trying to help people who have mental health challenges and who suffer with mental illness. And I think that it's really important to lift those up, especially the Kettle. It does such great work through its supportive housing, helping people who don't have ID, feeding people meals, offering drop-in services, as well as the drop-in center that they want to build. So I just, in hoping that we can find a way to move forward before they take off and leave Vancouver possibly, that's why I'm moving this forward. And I appreciate it wasn't able to work out before, but I thought this new program might be a way to bring staff and this great organization back together. Thanks so much.
Thank you. That's your time. I don't see any speakers to this. Oh, no, Councillor Carr to the amendment.
Oh, actually, sorry. I want to speak to the main motion, not the amendment. I'm fine with the amendment.
Okay. Seeing as there are no speakers to this amendment, we can call a vote on the amendment that is on the screen. Thank you, Clerk. Voting queue is on screen. I'm afraid I don't have access to see who or hasn't or has voted. So, Clerk, have we had all the votes come in?
Chair Fry, this is the clerk here. Sorry, it was an exercise of getting the microphone turned on with the vote happening. Yes, we have all votes in. I can end the vote for it to go up on the screen.
Yes, thank you. I don't have the chair screen up.
Okay. So the vote passes with Councillor Carr abstaining.
Okay. Thank you, Clerk. And if we can go back to the main motion queue. And Councillor DiGenova's clock is still going, but
No, I wasn't. I was only on the queue for the amendment. So if you could
okay.
please stop my clock, thank you.
Thanks, Clerk. If we could advance to
my comments for now. Thank you.
If we can advance to Councillor Carr.
Yes, thank you, Chair Fry. I do have a point of information through you to any staff that are available, the city manager or deputy city manager. My question is, I just want confirmation again. I did ask this before, but confirmation that the city is still planning on an RFP going out for the development of our site, which is adjacent to the Kettle site. Is that still happening?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you.
Chair? Yeah. Okay, thanks, Chair. Yes, we are in the process of issuing an RFP to select a partner, nonprofit partner for the development of the housing on the site and the utilization of the commercial spaces that may be created as a part of the development. We do that pretty much with every project that we partner on. It's only fair to the nonprofit sector that different organizations have an opportunity to put forward their best proposals to partner with us on the development of these sites. So we are in the process of doing that, and it's the same process that we go through with our grants. We adjudicate them and we rate them based on a series of criteria. Normally, on a project like this, when we're selecting a housing provider, we would be partnering with BC Housing and in the evaluation of those proposals. So that's definitely the process that we are undertaking at this point.
Okay. My second question is, if this
a point of privilege.
Sure.
I just noticed the timers aren't running right now, so I was just wondering if only my timer's running.
I think point of information is not...
Point of parliamentary procedure.
Right, and I believe point of informations are outside the clock.
Yes, but point of parliamentary procedures aren't. So if we could just make sure. I don't know if my clock's still running, so if it could be turned off, thank you. And if others' clocks could be running, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carr, you had a point of information for...
Yes, I have another point of information. Thank you. Through you, Chair Fry, and that is, if this motion were to be defeated, would that in any way prejudice the ability of the Kettle Society from applying to the RFP?
Through the chair. No, I don't think so. We would hope, and we've expressed to Kettle that we would hope that they would respond to the RFP and to put together a proposal that would outline how they would anticipate being involved in the project and what resources they could bring and what their vision would be for drop-in center and whatnot. So we would definitely encourage all nonprofits that are interested in partnering on that particular site for community facility as well as for housing. And that's, it's only fair to nonprofits that they all get a chance to put together their proposals.
Okay, and my last question actually relates, another point of information, my final point of information, through you, Chair Fry. Are there, Mr. City Manager, a range or a number of nonprofit societies that staff can anticipate would be interested in making application to the RFP process?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we on other projects, we get a variety of nonprofits from Success and others responding, and it's a really good opportunity to see what kind of interest there is from the nonprofit sector to bring community resources as well as resources toward the housing. So yeah, I think I would expect a strong interest from a variety of nonprofit organizations interested in working with us on a project there.
Great. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, is that it, Councillor Carr?
It is. Thank you.
Okay. Next on the queue is Councillor Swanson, but before we get there, I just want to highlight that we can really only keep going today till about 2:45 before we're going to have to break and recess going into public hearing. So if we don't get this...
Point of parliamentary procedure?
Yeah?
I have this meeting scheduled till 2:30, Vice Chair Fry.
And
is that incorrect?
I have a note from the clerk that says we can keep going to 2:45 to try and finish.
Okay, well, I actually do have a commitment, an appointment booked, but I will see what I can do in the next few moments.
Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to advance to Councillor Swanson and just note that we do have time constraints. Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, I have some point of information to the manager. 3 questions here. How many shelter rate units are in our RFP? Do we have a commitment for BC housing funding? And how long before a building that is proposed in RFP could actually be up and open?
Mr. City Manager, did you catch that?
I did. Sorry. Yes. Getting the mute off there. What we typically do is we work with the nonprofit that responds, the winning nonprofit from an RFP. Different nonprofits have different resources that they can bring to the table and different suggestions for how to deepen affordability. And so we typically we work with that nonprofit and get as deep an affordability as we can. That is one of the criteria that would be included in the RFP. So if nonprofits have resources that they would bring to the capital side of the project or operating that could deepen the affordability, that is definitely one of the things that we would be asking nonprofits to propose or to include in their proposal, how they would deepen affordability. So that's number one. And included in that is kind of their operating costs. Different nonprofits have economies of scale and can help to reduce the cost of running a project like this, which then enables us to deepen the affordability. We have been in discussions with BC Housing about the site, and we would definitely anticipate working with them as we have with all of our other most of our other VAHA projects. So that would most certainly be part of the mix that we would envision, is working with BC Housing on the project. And then the third question, Councillor Swanson, can you remind me?
How long before the building could be open?
Oh, thanks. Yes. I mean, these projects take a few years typically to select a partner, go through a design process together, and then get the financing completed, and then actually construction. So it's probably 3 to 4 years, I think would be just a guess off the top here.
Okay, so the Kettle is saying that they could have 50 shelter rate units, that they have BC housing funding, and then they could get started right away. So that seems to me like since we're in urgent need of shelter 8 units, that would be a plus. But you're thinking, no, it's not?
Well, we have been in discussions with Kettle, and they require millions of dollars from the city in order to proceed on a project. And out of fairness to other nonprofits, it's generally we go through a competitive process to select partners, and that's part of our procurement policy, and that's just how we operate out of transparency and fairness, is to give other organizations a chance to compete to partner with us. So selecting one organization over all others is, if that's what council wants to do, that's fine, but it's not in compliance with our own policies for this kind of project and how we would typically work. So, it's really up to council if you want to vary from our policies, but generally what we would recommend is that we go out and do an RFP, and Kettle can respond, and if they are indeed prepared to do all of those things in that way and indeed have that money, then they would have a good chance of succeeding. But that also gives council a chance to look at all of the opportunities that are out there rather than picking one immediately.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to add that I found it very refreshing to have somebody from Grandview coming and saying that they want a modular housing building in their neighborhood. That's it.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Folks, I see a number of people on the queue, and in back and forth with the clerk, I understand that we do have a finish at 2:30 for this meeting, and then public hearing starting at 3. So this conversation will need to be reconvened after the public hearing at 6 o'clock.
May I ask a point of procedure?
You may.
Right? It's Councillor Kirby. Yeah. I'm wondering, is that because setup time is required for the next meeting? Because typically our procedures do allow us to go a little later. And I'm just wondering.
I think the meeting was scheduled until 2:30, and folks have made commitments based on that schedule that was presented in our calendar.
If it's the will of council to continue and finish, could we survey council and ask that? Because I for one feel this item has been held over a couple of times. It would certainly be nice to complete it. I'm wondering if we can ask council if they would be willing to go another 15 minutes, see if we can finish it.
We could. I have a feeling that we would not be able to get this done in the coming half hour either way, but I'll certainly, if you're, can I get a quick yays and nays to extending to 3 o'clock? All in favor of extending this meeting to 3 o'clock with the potential that we will have to reconvene after the public hearing.
Just a point of privilege.
Yes, Councillor DiGenova.
I just wanted to say, Vice Chair Fry, thanks very much. I may just have to attend a little portion of that by phone, but I'll do my best to be here the whole time. Thanks.
Okay, so can I, so with the understanding that we can try and keep going until 3 o'clock, or actually, I'm sorry, I do have a note from the clerk that it's 2:45, so we'd only have 15 more minutes.
Okay. Shall we vote?
I'm going to suggest